Welcome to Community Cop. My name is Julian Harper, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks and Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here today with my two co-hosts. First of all, Noel Leader.
Hotep family.
And second of all, Michael Graves, aka Big Mike.
Namaste.
And as you know, we always have our historical piece from our in-house historian, Michael Graves. Michael Graves, I know that it was on 10/24/2005, Rosa Parks made her transition.
Yes, just so blessed that I was able to meet her, or at least on two occasions, where I was able to shake her hand and embrace her. What a wonderful woman, so pleasant, so mild-mannered, but so important in our history. You know, when one considers her sacrifice, when one considers how she put herself out there, part of an overall strategy, she became the point person to break the back of the South and destroy, at least attempt to destroy desegregation in Alabama. So want to just acknowledge that she refused to acquiesce to the present laws of that day and sat down on the bus. So want to just thank her so much for that contribution, because when she sat down, it forced other men to stand. Anyone else could have done it, but they didn't. Consequently, it was Rosa Parks that made the heroic act that later brought forth Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Montgomery bus boycott movement, which took in excess of 13 months. So want to thank Rosa Parks, and we should never forget her contribution.
Absolutely. And also on 10/20/1892, Jomo Kenyatta, his birthday.
Yeah, one of the all-time greats, Jomo Kenyatta. Certainly, he led Kenya to independence and became its leader. Many people here during that time, Malcolm and others, noticed the English concern, the British concern over the Mau Mau, the secret Kikuyu movement, commonly known as the Mau Mau, which he was one of the leaders of, which helped bring independence to Kenya because white people were afraid. Here, they were in our land, and they were the ones who were comfortable. They were the ones that were empowered. So the Mau Mau movement made them very uncomfortable. And for the first time, they knew that stepping out of their door, they might not return home. So it was a great movement, and anything they did was for a righteous cause, which was our freedom and liberation.
All right. And also, last and not least, Maurice Bishop made his transition on 10/19/1983.
Yeah, one of the greatest brothers. We're in rarefied when we talk about Maurice Bishop, the leader of the New Jewel movement. This was one of the all-time greats. This country, Grenada, was dominated by the British. They had a puppet government there in the form of Eric Gary, and it was in 1979 when Bishop led the New Jewel movement in a peaceful revolution that took over the country and returned it into Black hands. They were conscious. They loved the Black Power movement here. They were able to educate the people. The people they had one of the highest literacy rates in the world after he maintained leadership of that country. He came here. Thank God I was able to meet him at when he came to Hunter College before he was killed. And actually his ambassador, Caldwell Taylor, was able to meet him. I stopped him to search him before he entered the auditorium, and his people around him was saying to me that this is Ambassador, Caldwell Taylor. And he cautioned them and said, no, let the brother search me to make sure that everything was safe, you know, which I did. And then after that, he just grabbed me and hugged me, and we hugged and embraced. So it was a great time, and want to, again, tell everybody that might not know, when you get a chance, these little snippets, look them up. Maurice Bishop, all-time great, led a peaceful revolution. And they used, this was during the Reagan administration, where they used the excuse of American students being there at the university as an excuse to invade the country on the 24th, 24th, which was days after his assassination, led by the CIA with the puppet Bernard Cord, who was on his staff, who was the deputy prime minister at that time. So long live the spirit of Maurice Bishop, one of the all-time greats. And certainly we should never forget this brother.
Right, and I just wanted to add, Mike, and you did an excellent job in all the stories, but and I think the community cop family ought to point out that Michael had the opportunity to meet all these great ones, because he just didn't recently start being an activist. Michael Graves has always been an activist. But as it relates to Maurice Bishop, I just want to remind the family, like you stated, Michael, Maurice Bishop was a noble, gentle leader. He was for the elevation of his small island country, and it was United States who invaded and participated, like many other Africans, in his assassination. But I just wanted to point out to those who love Joe Biden, Senator Biden at the time agreed with the invasion of this independent nation. And, I always point out to many of you that he has frequently been on the wrong side of history as it relates to our community. But big kudos to Maurice Bishop. Unfortunately, his revolution was short-lived. He didn't have the opportunity to really develop and bring his country forward the way he wanted to, because he was assassinated and his country was invaded. His sovereign country was invaded by the U.S. military.
Oh yeah, and just want to point out, I would be remiss if I didn't give credit and kudos to Fidel Castro and the Cuban people. They defended Grenada during that invasion. These were basically construction workers. These were the people that were building the airport, the international airport that America did not want to have built with Cuban hands. And these brothers from Cuba defended the country to the last man. So want to, even in his death, thank Fidel Castro for doing that. He didn't have to do that. Other countries didn't do it. It was Fidel Castro. So don't let the white man pick our enemies for us and say that somehow this person or that person is the enemy of our people. Castro proved himself, similar to the way Gaddafi did, to be our friend and our brother.
Thank you, brother, for that those historical pieces. Noel, this is a very interesting political time right now. It appears that everyone has something to say about the election that's coming up. So many people are taking positions on whether they want to support the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. We have actors, we have rappers, we have a multitude of people that are putting their thoughts and their opinions and any assistance they think they can give to whatever party or whatever they believe will be a benefit to our community. Just recently, Ice Cube presented a contract for Black America, and I know that you wanted to comment on that. And then there's been other, I guess, rappers who have made statements and took positions like 50 Cent and Kanye West, but I know we wanted to talk about Ice Cube.
Right, and all of them is significant. As you may know, and as you stated, Julian, election period is coming close. A lot of people have a lot of opinions. I personally don't encourage or direct anybody how to vote. I think everybody should vote for the candidate they believe best represents their interests and the interests of our community. As you stated, Julian, recently Ice Cube, the rapper Ice Cube, has presented a contract with Black America. He had previously been critical of all politicians, both sides of the aisle, both Democrat and Republicans, and he put out he made a comment stating that we shouldn't vote for anybody unless they represent our interests, which I totally agree. So he released a contract with Black America. He didn't write it. He met with some experienced individuals in different fields to put this together. And of course, it's not a perfect document, I don't believe, but he presented it and offered it to both Democrats and Republicans. The position of the Democratic Party was, listen, you stated some interesting topics in your contract with Black America, but first get us elected into office and then we'll talk about it. The Republicans stated, Ice Cube, you stated some interesting things in your contract of Black America, and we'd like to talk to you so we can perhaps include some of your items in our agenda, which he did. He met with some Republican officials, gave his opinion on some of the items, and they allegedly tweaked their presentation as it relates to Black America. Now, I, like Ice Cube, have very little confidence in Republicans actually implementing some of this stuff. And a lot of people criticize Ice Cube for even having the audacity, I guess, to make a presentation or even to present it to Republicans. But Ice Cube stated that he's willing to meet with anybody, especially those in power, who's willing to perhaps work some of the items on his agenda. He didn't state that he was confident that the Republicans would. He didn't state that he was confident that the Democrats would. And I think the criticism that he received is ill-placed. We always encourage our young people to get more political active. And although everybody's open for criticism, it shouldn't be like we want our young people to get active politically only if they do and say what we agree they should do and say. So it's going to be interesting. But I just wanted to say how disappointed I was for some individuals' vehement criticism by Ice Cube for attempting to make a presentation on behalf of our community.
Did you want to comment on that, Mike, or you good?
Yeah, I'll just say that this is not unusual. Certainly, whites have always cherry-picked and selected those who they would like to speak to as if they're really concerned about the Black condition. So the same way, whether it's 50 Cent, whether it's Cube or whoever it might be, this is not unusual. If we understand our history, then we would understand that before that, whether it was Kerry Washington or before that, Diana Ross and so many others that they would use from the entertainment field and ask them about the state of Black America, they might even, if they want to choose the professor's route, then they'll ask Skip Gates. Of course, he's married to a white woman. Of course, he's reflects the interests of white people. But at the same time, they will not go to whether it's Professor Leonard Jeffries and ask him his opinion. They wouldn't have gone to a Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad and asked him what he feels, but they are more comfortable. They'll go to Jay-Z, and Jay-Z now is supposed to be negotiating for Colin Kaepernick. Well, Colin Kaepernick has not played now in over 3 years football. Jay-Z was supposed to be representing his interests and has some official position within the National Football League. So they understand the game. This is a playbook. They don't have to reinvent. They know who to go to. When you talk about white America, they go to elected officials, they go to business leaders, or if they go to the military, they'll go to the Schwarzkopf types. They go to, General Schwarzkopf and others. They'll go to that type when they want information or want to get a feeling of America. But when it comes to us, they'll use preachers, preachers that are not politically savvy, people that are preachers around. Consequently, things stay, it's business as usual. So I'm not criticizing any way Cube. He's no worse than the rest of them. But they know the things that we want. They know the things that we need are the very things that they need, because they will keep the opportunities with respect to education, employment, job training, health care, and ultimately power will remain in white hands, and they're not going to share power, but they will play these games to make it appear as if they're concerned about our condition.
Well, one of the problems I have is that this is not anything new. You know, every time we go, or someone from our community goes to speak to these elected officials during election time, they are always in agreement. Oh, listen, we're willing to work with you guys. We understand that there are needs in your community. Give us a proposal, give us something that we can work with. But once they get elected, once they're in position of power, nothing ever changes. It seems like the doors close. And we never benefit collectively as a community. I think that our response has to be different because we keep seeing the same thing happening. I think that we have to develop a political structure within a structure that will work for our community. I cannot see the benefit of going to the same Democratic and Republican parties that have continued to turn a blind eye to the needs of our people once they get in a position. So I think that we have to revisit our response, our questions, and how we deal with these elected officials who have not shown us anything that will benefit our communities once they're in position. Noel?
And yeah, Julian, that's why, you know, as we talked earlier, you know, some people think that I'm pro-Trump. You know, I'm not pro-Trump and I'm not pro-Biden, because I understand that the only difference between Biden and Trump is cosmetic differences. Both of them are white supremacists. And I agree with you, Julian. So many people say that we only have two options. And when you have two options and you're not satisfied any of the two options that's presented to you, you know, this so-called best between two evils, you have to create a third option for yourself. The only solution, I believe, political solution to our problems is that we create, Julian, as you stated, and as Michael and we all have attempted to do in the past, to create independent Black political party. That is the only solution for us consistently being in this position where we have to hand over an agenda to folks that have shown time and time again that they have no interest in implementing any agenda. So we need independent Black political parties all throughout the country, and in areas that are predominantly Black, there's no reason in the world that the Black community should not determine who their senator is, who their congressperson is, who their city council, who their district leader is, with no assistance or no help from anybody else. In districts that are predominantly Black, we need to determine who we want to represent us, not the Democratic Party, because they have other interests, not these unions who make these endorsements, throw money behind candidates. They don't come to the community and say, listen, do you like this guy? Do you feel that this guy is going to represent you? They do what's in their interest. The Democratic Party and the local Democratic Club do what they do, think is in their interest. We need to establish independent Black political parties throughout the nation. And unfortunately, right here in New York City, under this particular governor, who's a Democratic, he made it a little more difficult to establish independent Black political parties by raising the stakes and the amount of votes you need. But that's the only solution, I feel, in my humble opinion.
Absolutely.
And I would just say that certainly they have the opportunity to speak to people like Dr. Cynthia McKinney, one of the greatest we've produced, especially since Adam Clayton Powell, probably the best we've had. And they won't ask her. They should ask her before they go to Skip Gates or go to these other elected officials who do not reflect our bosom interests.
And I'm sorry, Julian, let me just finally say, for anyone who wants the chemistry or the formula, should just follow Attorney Alton Maddox, who for years have attempted to establish Black independent politics. And he has the formula, he has the solution, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right, absolutely. All right. In the interest of time, Michael, I know that we had a discussion last week about these sundown towns, and I know that you wanted to speak relative to those sundown towns, and explain to the community, if they don't know, what a sundown town is.
Okay, last week, Glendale, California City Council voted unanimously to apologize for its history as a sundown town. Now, to those that don't know, sundown towns are towns where by the time the sun goes down, a Black person traditionally had better be out of there. And you will be faced with mob violence, rogue police departments, sheriffs, everything that one could imagine if you're not going by that time. To be colloquial, you have a lot of explaining to do. So these towns traditionally exist not only in the South, they exist in the North and even in the West. So Glendale, California is apologizing for its history. And now they say that they're willing now to talk to Blacks to see if they can help with respect to housing and education and other areas to make up for, you know, the past century of being a sundown town. Now, that's very easy to say you're going to help with the housing situation when you've already got the best properties for yourself. So now you want to open up housing, and when you have the best jobs and you have educated your people, now you're saying, okay, we're going to let some of these junior high and high school students elevate to college. Well, because you've already gotten your people such a head start. So while on the one hand, you have to say you're glad they're doing that and admitting this ugly history, it is 1,000 times that cities who have been sundown towns, and we have lost men, women, and children who were out in the street, out and about, did not get out of that town and get back to their place of habitat in a timely manner. So, and some domestic workers had to stay in that town overnight and stay indoors with the people who they cook and clean for because of that history of sundown town.
Yeah, and you know, Michael, thank for that. A lot of people, I'm pretty sure, never heard of that term. You know, especially you know, in today's society. But this is just a part of the ugly history, the racist history of America, which created all of these inconveniences for the sole purpose of being Black. You know, whether it's the sundown towns, whether it's Jim Crow, whether it's forced segregation, whether it's Black codes, United States of America, who has a history that would embarrass a nation of savages, always had all of these nuances, all of these attempts to frustrate and disenfranchise members of the Black community. They've always had all of these policies, and the sundown town, I would imagine, caused havoc to so many members of the African-American community at that time. So thank you for reminding us about that part of American history.
Yeah,
You know,
just want to say that that history started way back during Reconstruction. So it's not like in the modern era it started. During the Reconstruction, right after the abolishment of slavery. So you have to remember that there was still restrictive covenants that you could not buy and purchase land or accumulate land and property in certain areas. You could not, they also had in sundown towns and even in Black towns, sumptuary laws where you cannot be in a lavish, avarice position. In other words, if you like nice watches or nice jewelry, you could not wear them. If you have nice suits and ties, like you gentlemen have on right now, you could not wear them except on Sundays. Only the preacher and the what is it called? The mortuary? What's that called? The person who deals with the dead people?
The mortician.
Mortician, right.
Mortician.
Mortician. If you were a mortician or if you were a preacher, and in some situations a teacher, you was allowed to wear suits and ties. That aside, Monday through Saturday, you wore coveralls or whatever kind of work attire it took to do your job. You was not allowed to. Those are sumptuary laws. Please, look those things up and you'll see what I'm talking about.
And when you talk about these sundown towns, even with that not being the cover of how they define these towns, there are a lot of issues that are affecting Black people when we just talk about living in a community. They're subjected to all types of aggression, unwanted aggression based on their race. So that brings me to the next story. In Michigan, a man was charged with fracturing a teenager's boy's jaw or young man's jaw with a bicycle lock and chain. Now, this young man and his friends were at a beach in a community in Monroe, Michigan. So they were at the beach, they were playing music, apparently, as stated by this man. And he said, listen, you ends don't belong on this beach. You don't have the right to be on this beach. And if you keep playing that loud music, I'm gonna hit you with this chain. And he, in fact, hit one of the 18-year-old young men in the face with the bicycle chain, fracturing his jaw and breaking his teeth. Now, there were witnesses to this incident who stated that this male white, was calling them the N-word. He was telling them that they didn't belong here. He was very, very aggressive towards these young men. Not beyond hitting them with the chain, but just verbally aggressive and racially attacking these young men. Now, he was arrested and he was charged with a hate crime, but we need to see again what happens with this prosecution. Now, the problem I have is that how could anyone have the audacity, the nerve, I guess, under this atmosphere in society today in this country, he was comfortable enough to tell these young men that they didn't have a right to be on a public beach. We really have to see that there is a very strong atmosphere for the attack on African people, not just our men, our women, even our youth. So we really have to look at a response. Now, we talk about the sundown towns. We talk about a political community that fails our community. We have to respond differently. We really have to look into this, and we have to, again, when we talk about developing our own political arenas to address the issues that affect our community, these are the things that we have to talk about. These are the things that we need addressed when we have a law enforcement community that's failing us, when we have a judicial community that's failing us, when we have a political community that's failing us. So we really have to revisit how we look at these things collectively and hold these entities that are there to protect us that are failing us.
And it's interesting when Michael brought up the sundown towns, how what we're seeing and what you just talked about, where this white man felt that these young Black men didn't belong at a beach. No, all of this is residue from a time history past. And there's a consistency in American history where whites, I mean, we talk about Karens all the time, calling police because they see a Black person, whether it's a female in college, whether it's a Black man returning to his building, whether it's Black people barbecuing in the park. You have Karens calling police, not believing that the Black person belongs there. In this particular story that you talk about, Julian, a white man felt that these Black teenagers didn't belong in the park. Well, that's history, that's American history, where you have segregated beaches. So whether it's the sundown towns, whether it's the Jim codes, forced segregation or the Black codes, remnants of this hostility, this racial hostility, the stench of it remains in American society. And unfortunately, although Michael said that the sundown towns was in history past, remnants of that mentality exist in 2020. And the story that you just spoke about, Julian, is only a manifestation of that sick mentality.
Now let me just say this: the white man's name was Lee James Maya, 42 years old. He lived in Monroe, Michigan. And to think that in 2020, young black men cannot pass their time, spend their time at a beach without bothering anybody, and they have to be subjected to these type of attacks by a 42-year-old white man. Unbelievable. Michael, you want to comment or you?
Yeah, I'll just agree. I agree. It was well said. It's just a white sense of entitlement, and I'll leave it there.
All right. Our next topic is it's unbelievable. And Wakanjan, if I'm not pronouncing it right, a young black teenager was shot and killed. And I know, Noel, you have more on that story.
Right, yeah, this is a recent incident. A Wakandan police officer shot and killed a young teenager who was a passenger in the vehicle. The police chief spoke in a press conference today, claiming that officers had observed a suspicious, quote unquote, vehicle. Of course, he didn't state what the suspicion was based on, but the officer claimed that the vehicle backed up and he felt in fear of his safety, so he's discharged his weapon. He shot the young female driver who was in her 20s, and he killed the teenage passenger. Of course, there's going to be an investigation. There were body cams as well as vehicle cams present. They've been vouched as evidence. We'll see whether or not the police department fights the family's attorneys' ability to get access to these cameras so we can actually see what's going on. But it's reminiscent of what happened in New Jersey on the New Jersey Turnpike with Officer John Hogan and James Kenner when he shot at 4 black teenagers while they were driving on the turnpike. He claims their vehicle backed up and he fired his weapon. He discharged his weapon many times, claiming he was in fear of his safety. It found out that he lied. You know, when they did the forensic evidence, there was no tire spin. The vehicle wasn't heading towards him. And then also in Dallas, you know, some may remember 2017, Jordan Edwards was killed by a police officer after him and his friends was leaving the party. Officer claims that the vehicle was going in reverse and it almost hit his partner. So he discharged his weapon and he killed the young man. It was also determined that he lied, that the vehicle didn't present any danger to his office. So we'll see how this particular story goes through the motions, the system. But it's just another unfortunate incident where a young man in the vehicle was killed. And, you know, hopefully, you know, there'll be some justice in this case. We're not overtly confident that that's the case, but we'll see.
Well, you know, it's unfortunate that, you know, there are a multitude of stories that we can discuss and talk about when we talk about the attack on African people in this nation. And Michael, you know, there's a group called Black Lives Matter that's out there protesting. But just recently, there was a story of a white woman in charge of Black Lives Matter who was posing as a black woman.
Yeah, this is in Indiana. The woman's, her name, well, her original name, Jennifer Lynn Benton, and she changed it to Sachiel Paglin. So what she was posing is, she was a white woman posing as a black woman, and I would question just on the information provided where Black Lives Matter is. Indiana is one of the most racist states one could imagine. Black Lives Matter, she was the leader of the Indy 500, the Indy 10, pardon me, Black Lives Matter organization. Now, you know, those organizations have been receiving tens of millions of dollars over all these years. As a matter of fact, they're getting 100 million from the Democratic Party. They're getting hundreds of millions from all these other corporations that are giving them that money. Now, she was getting ready to be outed, so she now changed the course and admitted to being white. Because first of all, her parents were part of that outing process. as well as people that knew her well. So she changed up and admitted that she was sitting in the seat, unfortunately, taking the seat of a Black person who should have been leading that organization. Well, Black Lives Matter, it's no big deal in a real sense, because Black Lives Matter is Black in name only. When you were financing, I'm going by the rules laid down by the great Adam Clayton Powell Jr. He said, to be a Black organization, you have to be Black led and Black financed, and operating out of a Black culture, our system of doing things. You can't do things the way white people do them among their own with a white agenda, and then just have Black face. So in her particular case, not only did she falsify her name, falsified her identity, and led them for years, unfortunately, what can you say to the people who soldiered right along with her, shoulder to shoulder, step for step? Didn't any of them recognize that she was white? Can she just claim to be Black and somehow you get a pass and nobody question it? Well, that only shows you where we're at. And so it's a reflection to me. You can't get around it with Black Lives Matter. You know, this is the same thing with the NAACP and the woman, Doziel, whatever her name was, they did the same thing.
Mm. Yeah, you know, I was about to say, Michael, this seems to be not a uncommon phenomenon. You know, we've seen this on a number of occasions, and it's, you know, it's so surprising. And these individuals who take on Black face or Black images or claim to be Black, it's always so they can have an advantage, as if white skin in and of itself don't give them so many advantages in this society. So they want to take the advantages that a Black person would have and take that as well. So we have to always be vigilant with these individuals, whether it's individuals like her who want to head certain organizations, or whether it's individuals who engage in criminality. We're finding white people who put on Black masks or put on Black markings over their face and wigs. So this is becoming more and more common occurrence.
Well, what she did was she stepped out from the LGBT community, because Black Lives Matter at that time was getting more money. So she just kept and maintained her relationship with gay organizations, but now went to another level and was one of the main leaders in Indiana by doing so, by pretending to be Black. And that's not unusual. It's been happening quite a few places. So they need to, I guess, review the books and do everything under the sun, because when she was going to be outed by people that discovered her true identity, that's when she did a press conference and admitted several weeks ago that she was not Black, and that her father was not Black, because she pretended that she had a white mother and a Black father. And come to find out, she had a white mother and a white father, the same way Doziel, who for the NAACP, when her parents, especially her father, was getting ready to say, I'm a white man and I'm her father and my wife is white. The same identical thing happened. So this is not unusual. I think if we really scan, you know, various demographics and looked at the leadership of these organizations, we will find this happening. It'll be quite common.
Absolutely. Thank you for that story, Michael. Let me, I just want to bring something to you guys' attention. In law enforcement, in the military, and a lot of areas where people in power have the ability and opportunity to either affect the lives of the people that work under them, destroy the lives of the people that work under them, modify certain aspects of the lives of people that work under them. I've been finding that a lot of these people have either connections with either white supremacist groups or utilize their power to damage the lives of African people or some of the subordinates under them. Now, just recently, an Indiana cop was fired for his ties to a Nazi, a neo-Nazi website. Now, this was in Indiana. The police officer, he had posted frequently on a now defunct website, neo-Nazi website, and now he's been fired. Now, the thing with this particular case is he had been hired by the department. He had posted on this website, let's say maybe 2 years ago, in 2002 to 3 years ago, 2017. This officer's name was Joseph Zachary. He had joined the Lafayette Police Department in June of 2020. Now, he admitted to his supervisors that he was on this website. He had made entries. He had taken part of this particular website. Now, the police chief of that police department has stated that he knows that people are going to ask, during this investigation, this didn't come up that he was on this website. And now, Noel, I know you and Michael both know that when these departments do these investigations, they look thoroughly and deeply into your past, whether it's on websites, whether it's your emails. They dig very deeply into your background. So they look into these things. Now, the question is either A, now he says, this police chief by the name of Pat Flannery says he can't understand why his guys didn't find it, and he's going to investigate that. Now, I have a problem with that because, again, we both know how deeply they delve into your background when they conduct these investigations. Now, the only reason why this came up is because initially he was outed by a group on Twitter that account, and the group was called Ghost of the Past. And what they do is they look into websites and look into the past of people who join police departments and politicians, and they out them if they find anything racially derogatory in their background. Now, this group was able to find that, but their police department, with their thorough investigation, was unable to find that. So they ended up firing this guy. So my problem that I have with these particular cases, and we found, based on the FBI's investigation, that a multitude and a number of white supremacist groups recommend and encourage their members to join police departments, join the military, and these members are, sometimes they become chiefs, they become sergeants, lieutenants, captains, and their white supremacist attitude and their way of operating doesn't go away because they get promoted in these departments. So there's a major problem with this. And I think that chief has to be held accountable, and the members of his department who conducted the investigation, whoever this officer's investigator was, should be held accountable as well. Noel?
Right. And I know that even though you said, this is something that we're seeing far too often. And the department, as you stated, Julian, they're able to do a thorough investigation. But what happens is that when they get that black candidate, that's who gets thoroughly investigated. That's who's told entire background and entire life story is really looked at and scrutinized to the utmost. There's no way in the world somebody who had public images of themselves affiliating with hate groups should be accepted to a position in law enforcement. So, as you stated, Julian, they're unwilling. They have the capability to do thorough research and background checks on these individuals, but within the law enforcement community throughout the nation, there's membership in these white racist groups, there's sponsors, there's sympathizers and supporters of these groups in these police departments, and not only a few. So as you say, Julian, is very problematic. It should be very troubling, because even the Federal Bureau of Investigations has said that hate groups had encouraged their members to join law enforcement agencies throughout the nation. That's what we're seeing. We don't have to look no farther than Dylan Ruth, who went to a church and murdered 9 African Americans, who was treated so tenderly by the arresting officers, whose actions have to be described as being supportive, or compassionate of this murderer. So you have a lot of sympathizers within the ranks of law enforcement throughout the country, and that includes New York City Police Department. And we ought to be, as you stated, Julian, we ought to be very much concerned.
Right.
Yeah, I concur so much. One of the leaders of one of the major white supremacist organizations in Texas, who was the leader of Texas, when he transferred to another state, I believe California, some other state, the chief of the department hired him, and when the media brought it to his attention that he just hired the top person from Texas, who was a leader of the militia, the biggest militia in Texas, he said, well, yeah, I'm aware of that, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Mm.
He said he hasn't broken any laws. So they know it. And certainly when you look into, as Julian pointed out, about when you do investigations, well, it's nothing easy in an investigation than looking into a folder. The killer, the actual killer of Tamir Rice, was with another small police department before he transferred to the Cleveland Police Department. It was in his folder that he did not have the right mindset and did not comport himself in a way that a police officer should, that he was incapable of following orders and retaining information. And that he, one time, he lost control of himself at the range. Now, somebody could have been hurt. His composure was gone at the range. Consequently, that information was all in his folder when he went to the Cleveland Police Department. It was there, and after what happened with Tamir Rice, a review of his folder, now they say they didn't know, and they charged him and fired him because they said he was not upfront in revealing his shortcomings to the Cleveland Police Department, but it was in his folder. So they didn't charge him with killing Tamir Rice. They merely said, you should have been more forthcoming. And his partner, they got his partner for not having the exact time that the car pulled up when they jumped out of the car and killed Tamir Rice. So they found internal charges. So not criminal charges, just internal charges to discipline or supposedly discipline both of them. One for falsifying or not giving the accurate time. The other one not being forthcoming with something that's in his folder that any investigators would have to look in his folder. Yeah, you check his background, affiliations, like you said, Julian, emails. You check to see what's on social media. But what's fundamental is he just came from another police agency. Look in his folder. So that's why I say that they know, and I agree with Noel 1000%, that when black candidates come up, their application investigation unit will scrutinize the black officer.
Right. And let me just say this real quick. First of all, I got to acknowledge Conscious One, who says hello to Community Cop. He's watching live. We appreciate you. You know, when we talk about these investigations, one thing that I know about police departments, if you don't operate the way they want you to operate, you know, I've worked with people where if you weren't one of the good old boys, if you weren't, you know, part of the team that conducted illegal searches or were willing to go along and get along, then you were ostracized. You were pushed to the side. They didn't want to work with you. And it's unfortunate that the officers, and Noah, we know of officers who did the right thing, who lost their jobs from being honest and being forthright and trying to make sure that they work for the community as opposed to working for corrupt departments. So, you know, there has to be a real response when things like this happen, when we find out that they are hiring white supremacists, when we find out that officers who have abusive pasts in their folders or in their history that are being hired by these departments. There has to be some accountability, not just with firing that particular officer, but with the chiefs, with the investigators, with the supervisors that allow this to permeate within their departments. You can get rid of the cop on the bottom, but if you still have a sergeant, a lieutenant, a captain, a chief, or whatever the ranking system in that department that allows this mode of operation to exist within their apartment and within their departments, it's a problem. If we don't get rid of the poisonous or the stinking head, then that's not going to change anything at the bottom of these departments.
And, you know, as you stated, Julian, there's a culture of racism, white supremacy that exists in probably every law enforcement agency. And when people in our community are presently calling for police reform, part of the reform has to be the police departments throughout the country must reflect the demographics that they patrol. You know, if you have a Black community, it should be, that community should be reflective on the particular police department. You know, right now, the way things work, they intentionally eliminate Black candidates. That's why when you look at departments like New York City, you know, African Americans, even though we represent 24, 25, 26, if not more percent of the city, we may only represent 12 or 11% of the New York City Police Department. And that just happens throughout the country. That's part of challenging this culture when you have more individuals that make up that police department, you know, start off as officers, get promoted to sergeants, lieutenants, captain. You know, when the department reflects the community, I think you then have a possibility of getting change. But we cannot have these integrated police departments all throughout the country, where we have white boys from Long Island who can care less about the Black communities that they serve. They really concern more about a paycheck. They cannot dominate these police departments around the country.
Yeah, but unfortunately, as you stated, the makeup of these departments are predominantly white. The mindset of the supervisors are predominantly in opposition to the needs of our community. And what happens is, even when you find Black chiefs, captains, lieutenants, sergeants, they're usually put in positions that are not positions of power or positions that can affect the way the department operates. And what I do find is that when you do have supervisors and bosses who try to, for lack of a better term, go against the grain to ensure that there's some fairness and equity in the policing that happens in the communities that they work in and that they serve, those are the officers and the supervisors that are ostracized, put out of their positions, and even sometimes terminated. Mike?
No, I think y'all covered it.
Okay, excellent. We're heading towards the end of the show.
Yeah, let's say, brother, this is a big, very important, very significant time. It's elections. You know, a lot of people are investing their emotions in it. You know, don't forget, you know, there's a presidency, but there's also the Senate and the Congress. We encourage our people to participate, you know, and as I stated, they should vote for someone who reflects their interests. You know, don't vote against, you know, out of fear, you know, but it's going to be a very interesting time. And we're going to see shortly the results. This is a very unique election because of the coronavirus, because of mail-in ballots. So it's going to be interesting to see when a winner is actually announced. You know, I don't think it's going to happen election day. I think it's going to happen days afterward, but we'll see.
Well, you know, like you said, I believe it's going to happen after as well, because you got all of the mail-in ballots, you got the write-in ballots. I don't think this is going to be a easily decided election. I think there's going to be a lot of turmoil at the end. I think there's going to be a lot of controversy. As Donald Trump stated, you know, he's not leaving easily if he doesn't believe that it was a fair election. But I don't know what he's going to base that on. But
if he wins, it's a fair election. In his head, if he loses, it's not a fair election.
Yeah, well, yeah, that may be true, but that's not a logical and sensible way to look at it. But one thing that I think is very important, and I think you touched on this earlier, Noel, there are a lot of small local elections within Congress, within state and local elections that are occurring right now. And I think people have to pay very close attention to these particular elections, because there's a lot of things that affect our community other than the presidential election.
That's right. And Fred Hampton said, you know, everything is political. So all politics are first local. We can invest a lot of energy in the presidency, but hopefully when this race is over, that we will remain vigilant in electing district leaders, council people, tenant associations, local state senators, state assembly. You know, hopefully we'll be, you know, that more vigilant to make certain that, you know, the right people are in office. And we have to consider creating and developing a Black independent political party. You know, that is most important, or else we're going to continue to get what we have gotten, which is nothing, which is being ignored by one political party and being promised the world and getting nothing from the other political party. So we need our own independent Black political party.
And you know what? I hope people are not being distracted by some of the reports in the media. When we talked about earlier, some of the rappers and some of the entertainers that are coming out with statements relative to who they want to endorse and who they think will be the better candidate. I think there was a report where 50 Cent said that he's voting for Donald Trump because he don't want to become 20 Cent, meaning that the taxes are going to be raised by Joe Biden. And one thing that you just said, Noel, I concur with, is we have to vote our interest. I'm not mad at 50 Cent because he believes that's his interest. But that's a selfish, in my opinion, a selfish interest solely to benefit himself. And I think that for me, it's about the collective, our entire community. But we run out of time. We only have a little bit of time left. We're going to go to our closing comments. Michael Graves.
Yeah, just want to say to the live audience, I'm shooting right out of here now to go to Professor Mackey's lecture group. We're meeting 103 Quincy Street. I'll see you there. Black woman, Black man, Black woman, protect the Black child, accept your own and be yourself.
Noel Leader.
All right, Lenny Lou, Kitty Cat, Little Mo, we love you. Community Cop family, we love you. Stay vigilant, stay ready. Peace.
All right. As I always say, Sharon and Darlene, thanks for watching. Thanks for your support and your critiques of our show. Even everyone who gives us critiques, you know, we greatly appreciate it. Community Cop family, thanks for watching. We love you guys. We love your support. And we always got to give thanks to our producers, Veronica Kitt, Sheila Berry, Nat Wood, Baby, everybody that assists. And you know, Big D, you are phenomenal.
Big D.
We greatly appreciate everything you do for us to keep us on the air, to keep us live. We love you guys. Again, you know, keep watching, and we'll see you next week. And Noel?
We love you, Harper sisters. Peace.
All right. See you guys next week.